The blizzard had buried the trail 3 days ago. Wind tore down from the Bitterroot Range like it was hunting something, carving white fangs through the pines and leaving the mountain pass silent and unforgiving. Ethan Graves moved slowly, each bootstep crunching over crusted snow, his breath fogging the air in ragged bursts. He wasn't out here for rescue, not anymore. Not since the Granite Ridge incident 2 winters back. No more lost hikers, no more extraction choppers, no more cries over a broken radio line. Now he walked these mountains alone. That morning his snowshoes had carried him beyond the usual ridge, following a sound he couldn't name. Not quite a howl, not quite a cry, just wrong. Instinct guided him, the same gut feeling that once saved lives and left scars just as deep. He found her at the base of a fallen pine, curled tight against the bark like the wind might forget her if she didn't move. A dog or something close to it. Massive mottled fur tangled with blood and ice, one ear torn, and eyes that flicked open when he approached. Pale gray, too intelligent, too tired. One leg was twisted beneath her body at an unnatural angle. Bite marks ran along her side, old and new, some so deep they hadn't clotted in the cold. She didn't growl. She didn't move, just watched him. Ethan knelt a few feet away, dropping his pack slowly, carefully, like he was setting a trap for ghosts. His voice was barely more than breath. "You're not wild, but you're not just a dog either, are you?" Still no sound, but her breathing slowed. He removed his coat and crawled the rest of the way, covering her gently. She tensed but didn't resist. "All right then," he murmured. "Let's get out of the cold." He slipped his arms under her frame slowly, testing her weight. She was heavier than expected, muscle and winter-thickened fur, and something else too, resistance, like she was holding herself back from fighting him. But she didn't, not fully. When he lifted her, she groaned once, a low sound that wasn't pain exactly, but memory. It rattled in his chest. Backpack abandoned, he trudged the 3 miles home with her in his arms, breath burning in his throat, snow flurries clawing at his face. The wind screamed against the trees as if angry he'd interrupted something sacred. By the time he pushed through the door of his cabin, his arms were shaking. He set her down gently by the fireplace, stone-built, deep, still warm from the morning's fire. The cabin was simple: wood stove, books stacked in careless towers, a pine table scarred by time, and maps pinned along the walls like old trophies. A battered rocking chair sat near the hearth, draped with a wool blanket. It smelled of smoke and silence. He got the fire going again. She didn't move. "You're lucky," he muttered, rubbing warmth back into his hands. "If I'd come by an hour later, you'd be frozen to the ground." Still she watched him. No blinking, no tail movement. Her body remained stiff, wound tight like a spring left in the cold too long. He boiled water, filled a bowl, and slid it toward her. She didn't drink. He didn't push. Instead, he sat down across from her and spoke like he would to a storm. "I don't name things anymore," he said. "Names come with weight. They make you stay, make you try." But even as the words left his mouth, something in her eyes flickered. Not challenge, not hope, recognition. He sighed. "Fine, just for now. Let's call you Nova. Temporary." The name floated in the space between them. She blinked. He noticed the scars more clearly now. Some looked surgical, others, raw, jagged, looked like they had come from teeth, wire, blades. He knew what that meant. Not just pain, purposeful pain, trained pain. He'd seen it before, overseas, on dogs that weren't meant to be pets, on animals bred for utility, for damage. He ran a hand over his jaw, feeling the old fracture line under the skin. "You've got that same look," he said quietly, "like the mountains weren't cruel enough, so someone had to help." She shifted slightly, just enough to pull her injured leg tighter under her body. He didn't reach out, didn't need to. Instead, he laid out an old quilt beside the fire, placed a bowl of broth near the edge, and dimmed the lanterns. Then he retreated to the far side of the room, to the couch where he usually passed out, half reading survival manuals he didn't need anymore. Sleep didn't come. Not that night. Each time the wind knocked the windows, Nova's head jerked up. Each creak of wood made her flinch. Ethan watched from across the room, not with pity, but with understanding. The same way he used to watch the mirror at 3 a.m., back when the dreams came loud and fast. By the end of the first week, Nova had begun to move. Not much, just from the hearth to the doorway of the kitchen, sometimes to the window where the snow piled high and the wind cut strange lines through the trees. But she was eating now, drinking too. Her gait was still uneven, one leg dragging like it didn't belong to her anymore. But there was purpose in her steps. She didn't bark, not once. Ethan didn't push her. Instead, he kept his routine simple. Chopping wood, boiling coffee, scribbling half-finished notes in a weathered notebook he never let her see. At night, he sat near the fire. Nova curled near his feet, both of them pretending to sleep. It was day 9 when she growled, low, guttural, deep in the throat. Ethan had just stepped onto the porch to retrieve the mail that never came when the sound rooted him in place. Not a threat, more like a warning. He turned slowly. Nova stood rigid near the doorframe, ears back, eyes locked on the tree line. A moment later, Ethan heard it too. Tires on snow. A black SUV, too polished for these mountains, was crawling up the hill, engine soft, deliberate. Government plates. Ethan felt his pulse shift. The vehicle stopped at the edge of the clearing. A man stepped out. Late 40s. Clean boots. Gray coat, military cut. He didn't wave. Didn't smile. Ethan stayed on the porch. The man walked halfway up the path and stopped. "Ethan Graves?" No response. "I'm looking for a dog," he continued. "Went missing from a training facility 3 months ago. Dangerous. Government property." Ethan's jaw tightened. "You lost her in the woods. Now you want her back?" "She's not a pet," the man said flatly. "Her designation is K-93N. She was trained for perimeter control and reconnaissance. She's classified." "She has a name now," Ethan replied, "and she's not going anywhere." The man's eyes narrowed. "That's not your call." Inside, Nova had pressed herself low to the floor, tail tucked, trembling. But her eyes never left the man's face. Ethan took a single step forward, snow cracking under his boot. "You show up here again," he said, voice like gravel, "and I won't just let the dog do the talking." The man didn't flinch, but he did turn. Back in the car, the driver's window rolled down just enough for Ethan to hear one last sentence. "She was built to obey, Graves. Don't forget that." Then they were gone. That night, Nova didn't sleep. Neither did Ethan. The shadows in the cabin stretched longer, like they were reaching for the parts of both of them that hadn't healed yet. The next morning, Ethan made a call he'd promised never to make again. Hazel Monroe answered on the third ring. "You said you'd never call," she said. "I need information." Silence. "It's about the dog," Ethan added. Another pause, then, "I'll be there tomorrow." Hazel arrived in a red pickup dusted with frost, her long braid pulled through the back of a faded cap. She looked at Nova once, and her breath caught. "Where the hell did you find her?" "In a snowbank." "No, I mean, where did she come from?" Ethan didn't answer. Hazel crouched beside Nova, her voice going soft. She didn't reach out, just watched. "She's not a canine. Not officially. Not anymore." "What does that mean?" Hazel stood slowly. "It means she was part of something off-grid, not military, private sector, specialized containment units. Rumors of experimental conditioning." Nova flinched as if the words had weight. Hazel's voice lowered. "Anton Cross runs the program. Ex-intelligence. No accountability. No limits." Ethan's mouth went dry. Hazel looked at him. "You were in his unit, weren't you?" "Briefly, before I knew what they were doing." Hazel's voice dropped to a whisper. "Then you know she's not the only one." Ethan stared at the floorboards like they might offer an escape route. "I knew there were other dogs," he muttered. "I didn't know what they were doing to them. Not then." Hazel didn't respond immediately. She crouched beside Nova again, watching her eyes, the tightness of her muscles, the flinch every time boots scraped wood. They weren't training them. They were breaking them. Nova let out a soft, nearly inaudible whine. Hazel stood. "Do you know what Cross called the project?" Ethan shook his head. "Ghostline." Hazel's voice was brittle. Dogs that could operate in silence, obey without question, function under extreme trauma. No empathy, no fear, no hesitation. But she hesitated, Ethan said, eyes flicking to Nova. She didn't attack me. She let me help her. Hazel nodded slowly. Then she's not a ghost anymore. Ethan walked to the fireplace, grabbed a folded envelope from the mantel, and handed it to her. Inside were 4 printed photographs, blurry surveillance images, dogs in cages, one being muzzled with a shock collar, another with wires taped to its flanks. One of them looked eerily like Nova. Another was younger, smaller. Hazel studied them silently. I found those in the cabin where I picked up Nova, Ethan said. Looked like someone left in a hurry. Blood on the floor, burned files in the stove. But that folder was under a loose board. Hazel's fingers tightened on the edges of the paper. Cross is trying to bury it. Again. There was a long silence. Then Ethan asked the question that had been circling his mind like a vulture. Do you think she remembers it? Hazel didn't answer directly. Instead, she turned to Nova. Let's find out. They drove 3 hours north, deep into the uncharted timber roads of Clearwater County. Snow had turned the world to bone-white silence, broken only by the crunch of tires on ice. Nova rode in the back seat. She didn't lie down. She sat upright, eyes fixed out the window, body taut like a bowstring. As they turned onto a narrow service road, Ethan saw it. She did too. The chain-link fence, half collapsed. The building beyond it, long, low, metal-roofed, windowless, and dead quiet. Hazel parked half a mile out. We go the rest on foot, she said. Ethan reached for his pack. We armed? Hazel pulled a sidearm from her glove box. Just in case we're not the only ones watching. Nova stepped out without command. No leash. She moved ahead of them. Not running, not cautious, just drawn. The compound was colder than the forest. As they crossed the final ridge, Ethan felt the air change. Still, pressurized. The way it did before an avalanche. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the walls were bare, concrete stained with shadows and chemical streaks. A line of kennels stretched along one wall, empty now. The metal floors inside were scored with claw marks. Nova didn't growl. She walked to the farthest pen and sat. Just sat. Hazel approached cautiously. That was hers. Ethan knelt beside the door. The metal plate above the pen still held a label. Unit 6, Reaper. No, Ethan murmured. She's not Reaper. She's Nova. The sound of a footstep behind them snapped all 3 into motion, a voice low and sharp. You shouldn't be here. Anton Cross stood at the edge of the hallway, flanked by 2 men in snow gear and tactical boots. His coat was clean, his gloves pristine, his face unchanged by time. He looked exactly like Ethan remembered, like a man built entirely from rules and consequences. Nova didn't bark. She stepped forward. Cross raised a hand, not in greeting, but in dismissal. That dog isn't yours. She's not yours either, Ethan said, rising. Cross ignored him. I gave her purpose. Gave them all purpose. Do you know what happens to a war dog without war? They rot. No, Hazel snapped. They recover. Cross's eyes flicked to her. Monroe, still wasting your talent on therapy animals? She stepped forward. Still trying to make ghosts out of lives you couldn't control? Cross didn't flinch. You're trespassing. We're documenting, Ethan replied, holding up his phone. And you're done. Cross laughed, cold and thin. You think anyone cares about one broken dog? Ethan looked at Nova, then back to Cross. I think they'll care when they see what she does next. For a long, taut moment, no one moved. Then Nova stepped forward. Slowly, deliberately. Her paws made no sound against the concrete. Her head was low, but her eyes burned with something new. Not rage, not fear, judgment. Cross's men shifted, hands twitching toward holsters. Ethan raised a hand, steady and firm. Don't, Cross sneered. She's just a tool, Graves, a broken blade, and you're waving it like it's still sharp. Nova took another step. Cross kept talking. You think dogs care? You think they remember who saved them? Nova stopped. Then she did something no one expected. She sat, right in front of Cross, staring up at him, silent. Then her gaze shifted, to the hallway behind him, to the locked door. She rose, moved past him, without even a flick of her tail, and sat again, this time in front of the door. Ethan's chest tightened. "There's someone in there," he said. Cross's jaw clenched. Hazel moved first, brushing past him. "Get out of the way." One of Cross's men blocked her path. Then came the sound that stopped them all. A low growl. Not from Nova, from behind the door. Then a whine, high-pitched, weak. Hazel slammed her shoulder into the keypad. It didn't budge. Ethan joined her, and together they forced it open with a crowbar from a utility rack nearby. Inside, the room was dark, cold. The floor was lined with straw, wet and soiled. In the corner, chained to a bolt, was a young shepherd, no more than a year old, emaciated, shivering, muzzle bruised. Nova stepped in first. The pup didn't recoil. It lifted its head weakly and let out a soft, rasping yelp. "Recognition," Hazel whispered. She knew. She knew he was here. Ethan turned, fury rising like fire in his throat. "How long has he been in there?" Cross didn't answer. Hazel knelt beside the pup, examining the wounds. Shock trauma, starvation. But the worst part? He wasn't alone. There were more here. This was just the last one. Nova lay down beside the pup, curling her massive frame around his like a shelter. Cross took a step back. Then another. But Ethan was already moving. "You used them," Ethan growled. "You trained them to feel nothing. And when they couldn't take it anymore, you locked them in darkness." "They were property," Cross hissed. "No," Ethan snapped. "They were survivors, and now they're witnesses." Cross's hand darted toward his coat. Hazel shouted, "He's reaching!" Too late. But it wasn't Ethan who moved first. It was Nova, a blur of gray and muscle and silent fury. She launched at Cross, not with teeth, not with violence, but with force. She slammed him backward against the wall, pinning him with her weight, teeth bared inches from his throat. And yet, she didn't bite. She just held him, still, trembling with restraint. Cross didn't scream. He didn't speak. Because he knew. This dog wasn't broken. She'd been reforged. Hazel moved in, zip-tying his wrist with a calmness that spoke of years of repressed rage. Ethan confiscated the pistol from inside Cross's jacket, unloaded it, and tossed it to the far corner. Outside, the wind had shifted. For the first time in hours, it wasn't screaming. They called the sheriff's department from the road, sent the location, the photos, the recordings. By the time they reached the main highway, sirens were already echoing through the trees. Nova rode beside the pup in the back seat, her body curled around his like a shield. She didn't sleep, but her eyes were softer now, less haunted. Hazel looked back at them in the rearview mirror. "What are you going to do now?" Ethan leaned his head back against the window. "I don't know. Maybe I'll rebuild the old ranger station, turn it into a sanctuary." "You think one dog can change everything?" He looked over his shoulder at Nova, then down at the young pup curled into her side. "I think she already did." The words hung in the air like a truth no one could argue with. Ethan glanced at Nova through the rearview mirror. Her eyes weren't just alert. They were aware, present. She rested her head gently atop the pup's back, her breath steady and low, like she was teaching him how to survive simply by existing. Hazel watched the road, but her voice was soft. "That little one, he's been conditioned. You saw the tremors, the stare, but he responded to her. Not us." Ethan nodded. He didn't flinch when she moved. It was like he knew her, or recognized something in her. "They probably came from the same run," Hazel muttered. "Crossbreeds in batches, 2, maybe 3 litters trained together. The bond is burned in with fire." Ethan's grip tightened on the wheel. What kind of person looks at that and sees a weapon? Hazel was quiet for a long time. Then, someone who forgot what it meant to be human. They reached the cabin just after dusk. The sky bled gold at the horizon, and the wind carried the sharp scent of pine and ice melt. Ethan built the fire higher than usual. Nova didn't leave the pup's side. She guided him toward the hearth, her body always between him and the door, her eyes sweeping the room with every crack of wood or echo of footstep. Ethan watched it all from the corner. The way she ate slowly, so he wouldn't feel rushed. The way she lay on her side to make herself smaller. The way she never once turned her back on him. "She's protecting him," Ethan said aloud. Hazel, sitting on the far side of the cabin with a mug of coffee in her hands, nodded. "Not just from us, from his own memory." The pup, Hazel had started calling him Scout, hadn't made a sound. No bark, no whine, only the occasional shiver. That night, while the wind howled through the rafters and the fire cracked, Scout finally moved closer to Ethan. One small step, then another. He stood at Ethan's feet, tail low, ears back. Ethan didn't speak, didn't reach out. He just lowered his hand, open-palmed, still. Scout sniffed it once, then curled up beside Nova again. It was enough. 3 days passed. Then came the drone. Hazel spotted it first, a faint whine overhead, barely audible. But Nova heard it immediately. She lifted her head, body tense. Scout darted under the table, trembling. Ethan stepped outside, shotgun slung low, eyes scanning the gray sky. A small black speck hovered above the tree line, just long enough to be seen, then zipped away westward. He didn't need to guess. "Cross has backups," Hazel said, standing beside him. "He always did," Ethan muttered. "And he'll come for the dog." Hazel shook her head. He'll come for the story. You saw how Nova stood down. That video's already out. Someone saw it. Someone recorded it. Cross can't afford that kind of truth getting out." "So what?" Ethan snapped. "He sends cleanup?" "Or worse," Hazel said. "He discredits it, turns the narrative, makes her dangerous again." Ethan looked at Nova, now curled tightly around Scout near the fireplace. "No," he said. "Not this time." That evening he went to the attic, pulled down the old radio, the one he'd buried after Granite Ridge, dusted it off, tuned it carefully through static and silence until a clear channel buzzed to life. "This is Graves," he said into the mic. "Clearwater Quadrant. I've got a former Ghostline unit with direct ties to Anton Cross. I've got photos, I've got names, I've got proof." He hesitated, then added, "And I've got a dog who remembers everything." Hazel blinked. "You just burned every bridge you had." Ethan nodded. "Then I guess we build new ones." Nova stood at the cabin door that night, watching the dark, listening. She didn't growl, but her eyes didn't blink either. Scout sat beside her, copying every move she made. And somewhere, far off in the night, the silence felt like a warning, not a threat, a promise. That's what the stillness meant now, not the absence of danger, but the presence of resolve. Something had shifted in the cabin, in the mountains, in the quiet spaces between scars and silence, and in Nova. She was no longer just watching for threats. She was standing guard for the future. 3 days later, the federal van pulled up the mountain road. No sirens, no weapons, just a plain gray vehicle with government plates and 2 people inside. 1 agent, 1 animal behaviorist. Hazel had made the call. Ethan had sent the files. And somewhere far below the cabin, people had started to listen. The behaviorist was a woman in her 60s named Dr. Eleanor Ridge. She didn't approach Nova right away. She waited on the porch, letting the mountain air settle around her. "She's not just a dog," Dr. Ridge said softly. "She's proof." Ethan nodded. "Then let's make sure people believe it." Nova stepped out of the cabin on her own. No leash, no command. Scout followed closely, still limping, but walking better each day. His tail wasn't tucked anymore. Dr. Ridge knelt down, letting Nova approach. "She's carrying the weight of more than herself," she said. "You can see it in the way she walks." "She's always scanning," Ethan said. "She's keeping count," Ridge corrected, "of what was lost and what still needs to be protected." That night, Ridge sat with them near the fire and outlined her proposal. A pilot program, trauma-informed animal rehabilitation, a new model built on patience, not pressure. Nova wouldn't be Cage, she'd be the cornerstone, the first of her kind to show what recovery could look like, not just survival. Scout, too, would be part of it. They called it the Echo Project. Over the next few weeks, things moved fast. Hazel returned to her practice with a renewed fire, becoming the program's co-lead. Ethan began restoring the old ranger station, stripping away years of dust and regret. Scout gained weight, strength, confidence. His eyes lost the distant fog. And Nova? She changed everything. It started with a child, a boy, 9 years old, whose family had escaped a fire. He hadn't spoken in 3 weeks, wouldn't meet anyone's gaze, wouldn't leave the edge of his mother's coat. Until Nova walked into the room. She didn't approach him. She lay down facing away, body relaxed. The boy sat across from her, hands gripping his knees. For 10 minutes, nothing happened. Then he crawled forward, laid one hand on her fur, whispered something no one could hear, and smiled. Videos began to circulate. None staged, none produced. Just real moments. Nova guiding a veteran through a panic attack. Scout comforting a girl with tremors. Ethan teaching volunteers how to listen without speaking. And always at the center of it all, the silence. The sacred quiet where healing could begin. One morning, as the first snow of the season fell across the Pine Ridge, Ethan stood on the porch with a mug of black coffee. Nova sat beside him, eyes scanning the horizon like she always did. Scout chased a butterfly near the garden, barking softly. His first real bark. Ethan smiled. "You did good, girl." Nova didn't move, but her tail thumped once against the wood. Down the path, Dr. Ridge was arriving with a group of new handlers. Young, eager, ready to learn. Inside, the fire burned steady, warm, alive. And on the porch, surrounded by snow pine and the sound of life returning, Ethan whispered one last thing into the wind. "We're not ghosts anymore." If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful tales of hope, healing, and second chances. Tell us in the comments, have you ever experienced a bond that changed your life? We'd love to hear your story.